Ready Player One is out in theaters. The book was a thing. Now it's a movie. Spielberg edited or directed it. He's known for making classic adventure films, exactly the type of film that would get referenced in this very movie. So was it Ready Player Fun? Joining me is Aaron Capo.
Hello.
Hey. So, was it fun?
Wait, what's your name? What's your name?
My name is Zach. Should we start over?
No, that's good.
Okay.
Leave it all in, Zach.
Leave it in. We don't edit. We're one-take wonders. But I remember when this book came out, initially it seemed to be getting some decent reviews, a decent reception, and it seemed like I couldn't even listen to a podcast without some like audible advert where the podcast hosts were like recommending Ready Player One as like the book you have to listen to.
Zach, this was a book that everyone at Oculus receives when they have orientation.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. So it was definitely like a big deal. But then in like the time since Spielberg picked it up and started making the movie, the conversation has done essentially like a 180 on it. And now there's all these people coming out of the woodwork talking about how bad and how dumb it is and how no one should have ever liked it in the first place. I won't defend it because it is poorly written. And like it does like dumb things because it's all about the 80s references, right? So
the first chapter I almost could not get through because it's the part where there's so much of this book is exposition, and the first part of it is just like describing the Halliday Death Note letter, and it's talking about like he was in a perfect recreation of this, and this music was playing, and he was dressed like this, and it's from this, and also this was happening. And I was just like, every sentence has 3 references in it, and it's very difficult for me to continue reading this.
Yeah, it's very much like, I'm going to go get my DeLorean from Back to the Future and fly to the Enterprise from Star Trek. And
yes,
like that all sounds really, really dumb in writing.
But I remember I made it through the first chapter and I read it and I was like, this has grabbed my attention and I'm going to finish this book. And post reading the book for like a month, I was like, oh, that was a good experience.
Did you actually
finish
it?
Yeah, I finished it.
Oh, okay.
It's a very short book.
That's true. I forget how long it was, but
for like a month, there was a honeymoon period. And then more people, it started gaining more ground. And I started like critically thinking about it. And other people were like, hey, this is a weird part of that book. And I realized that Ernest Cline is not a good writer.
Yeah, no, he's not. And I think your experience is pretty common. Like most people were like, oh, that was just some, good, dumb fun, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then like as it starts picking up steam and all these people are talking about it and it keeps like, it's like having its moment, in the zeitgeist, you kind of stop and go, wait a minute. If you actually look at this book and try to analyze it, it's pretty bad.
Yeah. Like something that like everyone has said is bad right from the start is the follow-up to that book, Armada. Everyone is like, oh, this is very bad, just like from the beginning.
Yeah, that one I think is worse. I think I started reading that first chapter and I couldn't get through it and I just stopped.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Well, I was at like a bookstore. Like I didn't buy it or anything, but...
Zach, you gotta try before you buy. So
well, that's why I went to the bookstore.
Yeah, I was gonna say. You're a thief, is what I'm calling you.
Hey, it's you treat it like a library. You go, you sit down, you have some coffee, you read a chapter, you leave, and then you can come back and you can pick up right where you left off.
People do that, and it's like kind of a good idea.
It's not a bad idea, but anyway, all those like very wink wink nudge nudge sort of like references to things in writing almost have to be spelled out fairly explicitly, but it ends up sounding
literally
really, really stupid. But in a movie, I think it almost works a little bit better because those things can just like be set decoration. They don't have to be like, hey, look at my ship from Firefly.
Mm-hmm. I walked by a perfect recreation of the robot from something. I'm not good at references. I can't write this book, Zach.
Oh man.
I don't have the references.
Shame. Well, I mean, if you just look them up online and just like randomly write them in, you'll be good to go.
How much of his writing process do you think was just like sitting, staring morosely into the middle distance, just like trying to think about like, what was a good like car from the 80s?
Yeah, what cool
and then
ship
like
could I insert here?
30 minutes later, he's like, oh, the Enterprise. And he just like clacks away for a second.
That probably happened quite a bit. But I'm the book. The book also does. Oh, before we get into the movie, I guess the book also does this thing where, like, the main character will come like across. He'll be challenged with something, and he'll be like, good thing I practiced and perfected my skills at this task years ago, and now I'll be able to complete it in one try. Like nothing is really that challenging for him. So he's kind of a Mary Sue.
What is a Mary Sue?
That's a you don't know about this?
No.
This is a whole thing. Like people call Rey from Star Wars a Mary Sue because she's good at everything. Basically, if you're good at everything right away and you don't need like any sort of training and you don't struggle, there's no conflict there, then you're a Mary Sue.
I want to be a Mary Sue.
I wish I was, but I'm not.
What's the origin of that? What's that from?
I have no idea. It's just a thing. Look it up online. But
No.
well, okay, don't do it. So the solution to all the problems are kind of like Deus Ex Machinas, where like someone will have super intimate knowledge about something that wasn't set up or established in any way. And it's just like he's like, oh, at the very moment that I need this, I have this now that I had all along, but you didn't know about it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But yeah, so Spielberg kind of takes some of the 80s references out and replaces them with like 70s movies references, like The Shining and Saturday Night Fever, which seem really out of place. 70s? Yeah, and it seemed really out of place to me.
Yeah. So I guess overall, both of us are not fans of the book, but what did you think of the movie if you had to not rate it, but like, are you thinking of it positively or what?
No.
Really? I liked the movie. I'm going to come out and say it.
I thought it was fine. Like, it's dumb fun. And I'm okay with just like having some dumb fun and having it those references be in there and everything. But I think it's like trying to do things that it doesn't really deliver on.
What do you mean?
Like thematically, specifically. So like the book is kind of going for this theme of people not being comfortable in their skin and like literally putting on another face in order to live in a skin they think is more appealing. And like the book doesn't necessarily really utilize the theme very effectively, but the movie is kind of worse off because they just have these like Hollywood actors, because Wade Watts in the book is like described as being overweight, and
until he locks himself away and like does that thing where he has to work out to use the Oasis, so he gets super jacked.
Yeah. Well, and Artemis has like a birthmark covering half her face, which I guess
she still has that in the book. In the movie, I mean.
She kind of has it. It doesn't cover the entirety of half her face. But
no, she's still super hot.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like she's still like this really attractive Hollywood actress. So I don't think it really delivers on that.
The birthmark is like the next level of someone being like, wait a minute, take off your glasses and put your hair down. Oh my God, you're hot. Whereas this is just like, hey, I don't care that you've got a birthmark.
Well, it's because you're still hot.
Yeah, exactly.
It also tries to like, and maybe we should like say spoilers.
Spoilers for
everything. This is full spoilers. But there's also like it tries to tack on this theme of not like getting too stuck in virtual worlds and like so much so that you ignore the physical world.
Yeah, I was not into that.
And it just like comes out of nowhere at the very end of the movie.
That to me is like and this is something else maybe we can talk about later, but we both read Altered Carbon and really liked it. And they put for no reason in that the main character is anti the main technology in the book for
Yeah.
no reason.
Yeah.
Like, what's that about? Like, why tack that on? That lessens the story.
Yeah, that comes out of nowhere and it serves no purpose.
It does not.
We should do an Altered Carbon review at some point, separate to
I
this.
agree. Spoiler alert: the Netflix show was not good.
It was bad. Anyway, yeah, it doesn't really hit those themes very well, or it like tries to bring them up and then it just sort of drops the ball. It also it feels kind of standard teen dystopian future fantasy, where like only teens are capable of saving the world or whatever. I was like, this is a common trope, in teen dystopian stories, and so it sort of broaches the subject of like corporate greed. That's a big topic of discussion in the gaming world these days because of things like microtransactions and
Yeah,
loot
that's
boxes
super true.
and like mobile apps making ad revenue off of free games, stuff like that. Especially with like EA and their loot boxes, and I feel like the movie's like, hey, we're gonna once we like get control of the Oasis, we're gonna sell, make all this ad revenue from selling ad space on like the visors or whatever. And that's it. That's all they do with that. They just kind of stop after that. And it's just like if the filmmakers were a little more keyed into like the actual topics of discussion in the games industry, maybe they would have like known that this was like kind of a big hot button issue right now that they could have gone into. I guess it was probably in development maybe before the whole EA Battlefront 2 thing, but
I mean, the amount of CG alone, and also like 100% Spielberg does not know what a loot box is.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely like a bunch of Hollywood people that they know old cinema, and that's why there's like scenes from The Shining and like Saturday Night Fever. But there's not, and like they have some of the more recognizable like video game characters like Master Chief and like Tracer from Overwatch, but
But Zach, this brings up the main thing that I wanted to talk to you about.
go for it.
There is a scene in this movie where my jaw literally dropped because I could not believe what I was seeing and hearing. We should talk about a lot of stuff, but post the race, when they go to H's like warehouse or whatever, which that was a cool I don't know. A lot of the like mini, like her having Kaneda's bike was very cool to me. And like the race spectacle was interesting. But anyway, they go and they start having a trivia off about Halliday. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
Can we recreate it right now?
Yes.
I'm going to be the girl.
I will be the other one.
What was Halliday's favorite game?
GoldenEye
What was his favorite way to play?
with Odd Job.
Yeah. And how did he like to play with Odd Job?
Slappers only.
What does slappers only mean?
It means that you don't have guns and you just melee.
Isn't that insane that that was dialogue in this movie?
And scene.
Yes,
I know.
scene.
I know that sounds like it came right from the movie, but it was just us.
That's an insane 30 seconds of dialogue.
Yeah, it is oddly specific, and it is
That, like, the script happened and someone had to do, like, there was a read through and people in the same room as Spielberg said those words. And Spielberg probably had no idea what was going on.
You're absolutely right that he had no idea what was going on. But
Slappers only, of course. Odd Job.
yes, absolutely. Well, I want to key in on an even better line of dialogue that is an actual line of dialogue that happens in this movie. It is spoken by the main character, and it's going to knock your socks off.
Okay.
It's something like a hater knows like what is it? I lost it.
A player knows a hater or
No, no,
something
no, no.
like that.
It's like a fanboy knows a hater or whatever.
Ugh,
It's
something.
so dumb. It is the dumbest line of dialogue ever uttered in a movie. It's so bad, and it's
A
like,
fanboy knows a hater.
yeah, it's so bad, and it happens like right towards the. I want to say it's one of the big moments in the movie
Yeah.
too, and I was just like, did he really just say that?
That's like the dialogue in this movie. I think Ernest Cline has a writing credit for the script, but I mean, it's like in some ways I can see like it's made for that kind of nerd who's like who loves the Big Bang Theory. This is made for people who like the Big Bang Theory, kind of.
Like not geeks, but they think they're geeks.
Yeah, like Big Bang Theory, people will be like, "Oh, I'm like Spock over here," and then there's a laugh track, you know, where it's very surface level, and people are like, "I relate to this. I understand what's going on right now."
I mean, yeah, I can see that. Well, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it is like Spielberg and it's whoever wrote the movie alongside Ernest Cline, maybe not necessarily being as in on this stuff, but they think they are. And so they're like,
Yeah.
oh, they're going to love this.
Like, I wonder at what point Punch Up happened. Like, did they write the script and then they brought in people to be like, fill this with crazy references? We're old. Or did they write in the crazy references and then Punch Up happened and they were like, oh, it'd be funny if, like, he fell down right here? Like, I'm very interested in the writing process of this movie and, like, where, like, I want to know. I would watch an hour and a half long Netflix documentary about the genesis of that scene where they talk about he loves to play his odd job. He loves to play slappers only in Goldeneye. Like, that is still just like, it's crazy to me that that's a line of dialogue that Spielberg, he may have even said that. Like, he may have even said the words like, hey, when you're saying this, like, be really amazed that he knows that odd job is like doesn't have any weapons. Like, think about that for a second. I feel like it's not registering with you that like Spielberg is aware of what, like, I can't even articulate how insane that is.
Do you think that in reality, the words slappers only came out of Spielberg's mouth? Or was he just sort of in a daze, sitting there directing while on this day when the scene had to be shot?
I don't know. I mean, I want to know. This is a movie where I'm very interested to see behind the scenes footage, and like I would love a commentary track.
Well, and so there's other weird things too, like Parzival references like watching Artemis's like Twitch streams.
Yeah,
Is
that's
Twitch
true.
even like a thing that would happen in this universe, where everyone essentially lives in a video game? Like, I guess people might watch movies in the Oasis, but like, are they watching other people play games?
Well, I mean, the book was not good, but it did. I think the reason it has connected with so many people is that it has a lot of interesting ideas.
Yeah.
And a lot of like interesting set pieces for your mind, basically. And one of the things that I really connected with, because I'm very into virtual reality. One of the things I really connected with in the book was H's like hangout zone, which is turned into a garage in this. But
yeah.
like a persistent like secret clubhouse that you two could go to, and there was a TV there. If you could just like chill out with your friends, like why wouldn't you watch a Twitch stream on a big screen TV? You know?
Well, and that was the thing. Like in the book, like without stating it explicitly, I guess it's like one of the more like he's not someone for subtlety. Like, don't get me wrong, but one of the more like subtle, like non-references in the book is just how sort of John Hughes it feels, because it starts off taking place in like this school, right? And he's
Yeah.
got these like chat rooms with these people, and he's like hanging out with H, and eventually, there's Artemis, and he like is the geeky guy who like falls for this like super cool girl who is way more interesting than him. There's like all of this sort of stuff, and so it almost kind of feels like a John Hughes like 80s teen movie
Yeah, I mean, I think that was definitely what he was going for, and that at least in the book they sort of like explain why everybody's a teen, because it's revealed that like the first challenge is hidden in plain sight on a school world or
Well,
whatever.
yeah, because
So like,
the other thing is that he doesn't have the money to travel, which is
yeah,
why his character isn't like leveled up compared to everyone else.
and that's like it's a real Willy Wonka type vibe, because he's like the one who's definitely he's not buying the chocolate bar every week. Like he's not like H going around to every different world. He is just a lowly little Charlie man, and he's walking around the school because it's the only place he has money to go to. And Halliday has, like, in his infinite wisdom, decided that he needs to pick basically a Charlie and someone who is like anyone, basically anyone can do it because anyone has free access to the school.
Yeah, it should be like for everyone and not just for like the rich people.
Exactly.
And that's a theme that's totally lost in this as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And you would have thought that Spielberg would have been a really good choice to direct a movie that's essentially this like John Hughes-esque like 80s high school like teen drama thing that's also this like interesting sci-fi future. And he doesn't do any of that. It's just like all of that is actually pulled from the story altogether.
Yeah.
But I don't even know who this movie's for, because like it has some like horror scenes.
I feel like it's explicitly for our generation.
But is it? Because it's like so dystopian future, and it's like it makes, I don't know, it just sort of feels like this animated movie for kids. And I was at the screening I went to. There, I was ended up sitting next to these two kids. I don't know why they were not in school, but they were at this movie, and they were very into this movie. But they were terrified by the Shining scene.
Really? And what
Yeah.
age would you say these kids were?
I mean, they were probably tweens. I'm not sure. But
I don't know. I feel like
but they cannot know the references to the things
No.
that like there are references to like Buckaroo Banzai and Silent Running
Yeah.
in this movie.
I feel like we are the generation who grew up with an N64, who some of us grew up with like NESs. And in the 90s, there was a time where people were still like, oh man, remember the 80s? And even to that day, like even to this day, people are like, oh, remember the 80s? Like our youth, I feel like, matches up similarly to what Klein's youth was. I feel like we're in the same generation.
Yeah. Like
So people in late 20s, early 30s is who this is for, I think.
for sure, but like the main characters are also like teens as well.
But don't you wish you were a teen, Zach?
I mean, yeah, you never stop wishing you were still not an adult.
Yeah, this is what is it called? Oh man, there's a word for it. Not fantasy. Wish fulfillment. This is wish fulfillment.
Ah. Yeah, but they do like make the references for like the younger people as well. Like they obviously Tracer and I think Master Chief probably weren't in the book. I definitely don't remember them being in the
Well,
book.
I think another thing about it is like, but definitely they weren't. But ours is, I think, the first generation to really like continue to develop post our teens. Like people in their 50s stopped liking cool stuff back in the 80s, or like whenever I don't know how old people are, but like we have continued to develop. Like we had the internet when we were first starting out, so like we're never going to become out of I mean, this is my declaration, I'm never going to become out of touch.
That's true.
But
like it's much easier to stay up on like pop culture these
Exactly.
days than it was like pre the 90s, or before like the internet was a huge thing. So
exactly.
I guess we are kind of going to be that first generation that gets to sort of stay up on everything.
We never stop being cool.
I mean, I like that idea. I don't know if everyone will believe that about us. But yeah, maybe.
That's something I think that was not articulated super well in this movie, is that
I think
all
there was,
things became the Oasis.
Yeah.
Like all video games like got ported it. Like there's a World of Warcraft world. They kind of did it with like the very first shot of the Oasis is like Minecraft world, which is maybe a more topical reference than World of Warcraft. But like the fact that like owning the Oasis is owning the entire world, I feel like was not
Yeah,
super well
they
intimated.
did a bad job of really setting up the stakes and setting up sort of this like the world and how everything is.
Because like here's another way this could have gone in this fiction is like the end of it is like, oh, but is the Oasis that great? Like another way this could have gone is like bad guys get the Oasis, start making a bunch of terrible ads, and everyone stops using it and walks out and like sees the sun for the first time, and like change begins to happen. Like that's a legitimate end for this movie in their fiction, where like the Oasis is kind of bad.
Yeah, and like they don't really set up like how essential the Oasis is because
Yeah,
in the book it's very clear that because it's a post-apocalyptic world, which you don't really get a good sense of that in the movie.
yeah, it just seems like kind of shitty.
Yeah, it's just sort of like, well, people live in like a trailer park. Like that's the only really thing we get out of that. But there's still like a city where like IOI is, and it seems
Hmm.
fairly normal, maybe a little bit futuristic, but uh,
Drones.
yeah, with drones and stuff. But you don't get the sense that this is not a world where people want to like spend a lot of time in the real world.
Yeah,
So you don't really get a sense of why the Oasis is essential to life now, because they also don't really get into the fact that people go to school there, people work there, people spend their entire lives in the
exactly.
Oasis, and so it's not just a video game.
Yeah, it's not just games. Like
Yeah,
they only really talk about like this is the most dangerous planet. People come here to get coins, or like this is a race where people can like collect coins from crashed cars, and like they're trying to get to the end, but Donkey Kong is there, or like King Kong.
yeah,
So
which that was kind of weird, the whole race thing, because it wasn't the first challenge was probably the joust game against the demon. Like the
mhm.
changes that they had to make going from book to movie were clearly things that they were thought we have to do something more visually interesting than watching somebody play a game of joust
Well, I
or
liked the thing where they did with The Shining. Like that was an obvious replacement for the War Games thing in the
yeah,
book,
yeah.
where he was just recreating War Games. But I thought the Shining scene was great.
Yeah, that it was fun. Although it seemed a little out of place to me, just a little bit, because, uh, like I guess you know that would probably be a thing that existed, I guess, in the Oasis, but it seemed like all of the references were about like 80s sci-fi stuff and like video games, and then you have this like 70s
Horror.
horror movie.
I wanted more. Like, wouldn't it be great? And this is something that I think would have made the movie a lot better. Is if like
You go
I
movie
guess maybe
jumping.
exactly like if he jumped into Blade Runner and they did like effects that they kind of did with the Shining, where like you see a young like they composite in from the actual movie. Harrison Ford, and he's like walking in the streets and it's all recreate like, but then he hops to like Jaws, like a moving hopping thing. I think would be even more interesting, especially if they did something crazy where it was like a one take, which would be very hard, I guess not hard to do because it's CG.
That would have been awesome, and they could have still kept in like the war games scene where like he couldn't do the whole thing where he's just there to like say all of Matthew Broderick's lines in that movie,
Yeah.
but like they could have shown him like be in that movie, and then yeah have like a movie jumping thing. I guess that would have been really cool, but maybe it would have been too expensive to do that.
Yeah, good question. Good point. I don't know. I mean, as is, it had a ton of references. I mean, this is like towards the end when there was that battle. Like every establishing shot, pretty much, you could go frame by frame and just like discover a crazy amount of little Easter eggs.
Yeah, oh that's the thing. Like all the action is so chaotic that you almost can't really see the references that they're trying to make. I don't know about you, but I was like desperately trying to look around and be like, okay, where are they? What is it? What am I looking
Well,
at
see,
here?
that's why I think this movie actually benefits from being seen in 3D. I can't test this theory. I might go see it again in 3D, but I saw it in 2D, and I thought some of the action scenes were very hard to track, and I was
Yeah,
wondering if there was another layer, if things were like stretched out a little in the Z, if I could maybe keep track of stuff better.
that's possible. Yeah, I found a lot of the action to be a little hard to keep track of, and I didn't
I liked
know.
the race
I
in
didn't.
the beginning. I thought that was cool.
It was my only problem with that was that like he has to go look at like the archive, and he's like, wouldn't it be fun to go backwards? And you're just like, people would have cracked this in the first hour. Like, what are you talking about? It's been days and nobody's figured it out. Like,
No, it's been years, Zach.
I mean, it seems a little silly to me. Like, as you know how quickly like everybody hacks everything in the real world. Like that, they would have solved that puzzle so quickly. Especially if the key line of information to lead you to driving backwards was stated that explicitly there.
I want you to say good. I want you to say things you liked about this movie.
Okay, hang on. I gotta think. Another thing they changed is when Kia Sorrento.
That's not his name. That's a car.
That's his name. So he goes to meet with Kia Sorrento, and he's like trying to pitch him on joining IOI. He's like, you'll make a bunch of money. But in the book, it's like this plot twist because he says his name. He's like,
he does it in the movie.
I know, but the difference is that we don't know up to that point in the book that he knows who Wade is. So you kind of it's like this plot twist that this guy's like super dangerous and he has all these resources and we don't know. There's kind of this air of mystery about like how much he knows and like what he's going to do with his information. Whereas in the movie, like literally the scene before that, the guy's like, oh yeah, his name's Wade Watts. He lives here. So when that moment happens, we're just like, yeah, we know. We know you know this information. This is not new.
Zach, this is not something that you like about the movie.
And then when Kia Sorrento sends his men to blow up the trailer park, was it set up at all that Wade has this separate
that's like the
rig?
first when he exits, he's like going to his secret little area, and that's when he sets up his
does he actually say that though?
Not explicitly, but you can tell it's very far away from his place.
Maybe I just didn't remember, but I didn't remember seeing that. And that whole time I was like, did they even establish that he has a separate rig?
Yeah, he like definitely. That's like the first part of the movie is him walking to his place and like kind of scurrying between two cars and opening it up and like plugging the battery in, and then he like puts on the headset for the first time.
Okay. So something I did like was like the Gundam wing showing up and fighting
that was great.
Mechagodzilla.
What a good segment. That was such a good segment. That Gundam, the way it moved, the light sword, like everything about it was awesome.
Yeah, all of that was really cool. And I liked what else did I like? Did I like anything else? It was
You didn't like the race at all?
Yeah, I mean the race was fun. It was a little hard to follow. But yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. It was cool to see like the DeLorean and the motorcycle and what was the other guy driving? It was like a
It's just like a big monster truck.
Man. Was it from Monster Trucks, do you think? You remember that terrible movie where monsters live in trucks?
I think a thing, if we're going to talk about stuff we don't like, a thing I didn't like was that scene that came out of nowhere the first time the bad guy goes in to meet with TJ Miller's character. And TJ Miller's like, hey, I got what you asked for. It's this sphere that's impenetrable. It makes this like shield. And then the bad guy's like, great, I'll use that later. But like for what? Like before this, he doesn't know that he's going to need to like protect the castle.
Yeah.
And then like they could have gotten rid of that and then just had like 5 seconds of dialogue where he's like, do you have anything that's like a big shield? And then he was like, oh yeah, I got this sphere. Like they didn't need. I mean, I guess it was kind of to introduce
Well, so
TJ Mille's
it
character.
seems
But
like so that's clearly a case of like two screenwriters that don't understand screenwriting. Because I think I sent you this video one time that had to do with how bad the editing was in Suicide Squad.
you did send me that, yes.
And the guy like breaks it down where he's like, everything is done in threes. You set something up, you establish it early, you eventually remind the audience that it's there or that it exists, and then later it pays off in some sort of way. And the example in Suicide Squad was the fact that the boomerang guy has this like thing that he keep like this purple stuffed animal that he keeps in his jacket or whatever, and they show it to you at first, they establish it, they remind you that it's there later, and then the third instance, instead of it being there, he like gets stabbed and you're like, oh, this is where it's gonna pay off, and he's gonna pull out this like purple stuffed animal and it's gonna have the knife in it and it's gonna have saved his life. But instead he pulls it out and it's just a wad of cash, and you're like, well, that doesn't connect in any way.
Right.
And this, they have the shield, but the way they establish it doesn't make any sense, because it's not like he specifically asked him to get it for any sort of reason. He's just like, by the way, I got this orb for you. You're like, okay. And then they don't reestablish it at any point, and then later they're just like, I bet we could use this thing that we talked about a long time ago.
True.
So it's very clearly two people that don't understand like film screenwriting.
I think that's the first level of screenwriting, but I think this is in joke structure as well. The proper way to do it, or like the more sophisticated way, is to set it up, have a fake payoff, and then have a real payoff that you aren't expecting. Like this happens all the time in Arrested Development, where like something is established, then there's a joke with the thing, and you're like, oh, that's why that thing happened, and so you forget about it. And then later, maybe like a bunch of episodes later, it comes back and you're like, oh, I remember that. I guess this is the payoff. And then sometimes even that's a fake payoff. Like it's all about the fake payoff, I feel like.
Yeah, they didn't really, and they could have done this with those instances that I was talking about earlier, where Parzival's like, oh, I know how to solve this thing because I have this bit of information just randomly that I've pulled out of nowhere. Like they could have established that somewhere, and they didn't. They just kind of like just pull it out randomly, out of nowhere.
I thought of another scene that I hated.
Okay.
This is, and that's not to say I hated the slapper scene. I thought it was very funny and insane. But this was something I just hated. And it was after she like breaks him out of whatever, and they're like chilling out on that rooftop. They're just like talking. They're having a conversation, and they sit down, and then there's like a beat. There's like a literal beat of like, and they're talking about something important, and there's just like a beat, and he just like looks like dead straight in front of him and like sighs, and then apropos of nothing, he's like, "It's so slow out here." And then she's like, yeah, it's pretty different in the real world, which like he's been spending a long amount of, like, it's not like he's super into the Oasis, or at least it's not established in the movie. But like we see him like come and go from his house constantly. He's like aware of the real world. I feel like that line just like came out of nowhere, and I laughed when he said that. The delivery of just like he's literally like, yeah, I don't know what we're gonna do. It's so slow out here. And she's like, yeah, isn't it, Parzival? And he's like, hey, you called me Parzival. And she's like, oh my God, did I?
Yeah, that whole romance did not work at all, I don't think.
Yeah, that switch was flipped very quickly, where she was just like, instantly DTF.
Yeah. That definitely didn't work. And they kept going back to it after that, like, well, we've already done the hard work of setting up this romance, so they're going to accept whatever we do with it after this.
Yeah.
So there was all these moments where he's like, hey, I love you. And it was like really cheesy and corny, and it made me roll my eyes a little bit.
Yeah, there was a part where he's like talking to the entire Oasis and he's like, I don't want to sound corny, but I found love in the Oasis. And then cut to her and she's like, oh my God, he's talking about me. And he's like a little smile across her lips.
It was, I rolled my eyes pretty hard on that one.
I still maintain, like, maybe it's my blinding love for VR, but I thought this was a fun movie and I want more VR stuff. So I'm pro this movie.
I mean, sure, I'm pro the idea behind it. And I would love to see, like, what if they made like another, not necessarily a Ready Player 2, but like what if they made another like VR style movie kind of like this, but it wasn't dumb.
Hey, Zach, I've got great news for you.
Yeah.
Ernest Cline is writing Ready Player 2.
Oh, no.
That's right. After the critical success of Ready Player 1, he was like, guess what, everybody? I'm doing another one.
So the thing is, I didn't hate the book. I enjoyed it for what it was. Like, I could realize that it was, like, dumb fun and it was poorly written. But I've read, like, other shoddily written books that weren't having as much fun, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I wouldn't give it glowing reviews or anything, but I still enjoyed it well enough. And like I can say I feel similarly about the movie, even though I have like a lot of criticisms about it because I think it's kind of a bad movie. There's fun to be had. Like I said, there were kids sitting next to me, and when they weren't singing along with the songs or freaking out about the horror scene, they were having a really good time with it. They were like really into it, and they were like reacting whenever like the main characters were in danger. So it was working for them at least.
VR is great.
It is great, or it could be. The promise is there, and Ready Player One is a good example of that promise.
There are other more seminal books that need to be made into, not, I guess they don't need to be, but like Neuromancer has like famously been trapped in development hell for decades. Like it's always like stopping and starting. And this might be the movie where people are like, oh, we have the technology. Maybe someone will finally do something with Neuromancer. Or Snow Crash, even. Actually, you know what? I think Snow Crash is becoming an Amazon movie or TV show. So I'm looking forward to that. But I don't know, like, there's something very, very appealing about, and this is what I really want, and there's an anime about this, sort of. But, like, You've Got Mail for the 21st century is a game in which, or is a movie in which two people are, I've talked about this on another podcast, but two people are meeting in the real world, but also meeting in a VR MMO, and they don't know that each person is the other person. Like, and that is my dream movie, Zach. I love romantic comedies, and I love romantic comedies where someone has a secret that's very juicy, especially if it's time travel.
What if?
And I feel like the VR MMO You've Got Mail is my dream movie.
So if they made a remake of You've Got Mail,
You've Got VR is what I would call it.
Set in like World of Warcraft, and it's You've Got Scrolls.
Even that, it doesn't have to be World of Warcraft, but yeah, it could be like a fantasy setting. That's a super good idea, and I would love it.
You've got carrier pigeons.
There's an an anime called I think it's called Diary of an MMO Junkie that is similar to that. It's not VR, but it is like people meeting in the real world, but also they're playing an MMO together, and it is a very good anime that everyone should watch.
What was it called?
It's got a couple of different translations, but I think on Crunchyroll it's called Diary of an MMO Junkie.
So not Sword Art Online.
That's another super good VR thing, I have to say. Like, that turns a little bit too sappy and also becomes sort of a harem anime, which people are probably not on board for. And I think Diary of an MMO Junkie is a lot more accessible and also a lot, like, sweeter. Whereas, like, Sword Art Online is definitely more Ready Player One-esque, where there's, like, a main protagonist who is just, like, good at everything and everyone is, like, super in love with. But it's actually, interesting fact about Sword Art Online, in in the spring 2018 season of anime, they're doing the next anime of that. So get ready for that.
I'm ready. So overall,
I enjoyed it.
enjoyed it. So you're positive on it.
I'm positive. I like VR. I thought some of the set pieces were a little hard to follow, but I enjoyed them. I thought some of the dialogue was insane to the point of being just like people need to see it because it's so crazy. I thought the Shining part was good. I liked the race.
Yeah, I would say those are examples of where it kind of improves on the book.
I liked like Kaneda's bike. I liked some of the like weird characters popping up. I liked the introduction of artifacts. I thought that was a cool thing to explain like interesting art, like items in the world, like the thing that can turn you into a robot, or like the thing that destroys a world and you like artifacts. I think is a cool concept.
I don't think they set up some of the side characters very well, because like
That's true.
Daito and
Yeah.
Sho were just kind of there.
Oh, that's a question I had. They're in the Shining thing, and H is like, "You ever see The Shining?" And Daito, or whichever one is the little one, is like, "I have to see it with my fingertips."
Yeah, that's Sho, the 11-year-old.
Is he blind?
No. He's like he's saying that when he watches it, he covers his eyes for most of it.
That was very difficult. Like to me, he was saying like, "Oh, I read Braille."
No. He like watches it through his fingers because he holds his hand in front of his eyes so he doesn't see most of it.
I don't know. I feel like that could have been illustrative. He should have been like, "I see it." No, I don't know what the line should be, but it shouldn't be "I use my hands," because like for everything after that, I was like, "Oh, he's blind. That's why he's so good. He's like daredeviling it."
No, I thought it was fairly clear that he just like covers his eyes for a lot of the movie.
I don't know.
Anyway, I think I am with you on it being fun, and I like some of the references.
What about that scene where he had to fuel up his DeLorean and he waited for someone to crash and then he like whipped his DeLorean around, threw the door up, and the coins were like going into his UI? I thought that was a cool like shot.
It was a cool shot. It seemed a little strange. Like they have to physically go touch the coins. Like
Yeah. Well, they like scoop in. They like swoop in. Like,
yeah.
what about that? What about Halliday? I thought that actor was really good. I don't know who that is. I know it's someone famous.
It's Mark Rylance, which is like the Spielberg effect on this movie. Like one of his guys, you know, the guys that is in every Spielberg movie, like it would have to be him. I thought he was a way more interesting. Like he and Artemis are like the two most interesting characters in this movie, and that is kind of bad for Wade, who's like the main character.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And then like Simon Pegg is also in this movie, and he's also just sort of there, and then he like turns up at the end, and he was like, "I was here the whole time."
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of stuff that Wade said, like every time Wade like professed his love for Artemis, I was just like, this is lame.
Yeah.
Like he's not basing this off anything. I was like, when Artemis was like, "You don't even know me," I was like, that's correct.
Yeah,
like,
that is correct.
You are an insane child, basically. Like you don't know what love is. You're just like latching onto this girl because she likes your references.
Well,
like
that's why like the whole like I watch all their Twitch streams just seemed like kind of a bit much. It's just like, is that supposed to mean that you feel like you know this person because you've watched her Twitch streams?
it's sort of like, did you ever see Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist?
I watched 10 minutes of that movie before I turned it off and was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
Man, we have slightly different tastes in movies, because I enjoyed that movie. But there was a scene in that movie where like so Michael Cera has like a shitty girlfriend, and he's like constantly making her mix CDs, which she's like, ugh, these mix CDs, and she throws them away. But Kat Dennings is always like, snatching them out of the garbage, like, oh man, whoever this guy is, his mixies are so good. And I think that is like a good way to establish, like, it's similar to like I watch all your Twitch streams, because it's kind of like the You've Got Mail thing where she doesn't know who he is, but she's fallen in love with part of him. But like with Twitch, you sort of know, I mean, you don't know the person, but you know a lot about them. It's not like you fall in love with their writing or you fall in love with their art. It's like you fall in love with their public image, which I feel like is not healthy. It's like being like someone who stalks celebrities.
Yeah, exactly. Like there have been like I've read articles about Twitch streamers who have had like random fans from their chat just like show up at their house, and they're like freaked out because it's like, you don't really know me. Like, you've seen me on a live stream, you don't know who I am, and I certainly don't know you. So you showing up here is really weird. Don't do that. And I feel like
that's basically what happened. In the movie. You're
that's
right.
how this romance starts, and it's really creepy, kind of.
But I think the pieces, much like in the book, the pieces are there. If I was able to take this and redub it and remove some scenes, I think that I could make a movie that you would actually like.
Yeah, well, and like I keep saying bad things about it. I did have some fun with the movie, so I don't think it's all bad. It's just it has a lot of things that are kind of easy to mock, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's true.
So like, just because it's easy to mock doesn't mean it's bad, and I mean sometimes it does, but it's just it's got a lot of flaws. But I think it's still entertaining, which is what it needs to be.
Would you say it's better than the book?
No.
Really? Because I think it is.
Well, so the book is like really poorly written, but the movie felt kind of like the Cliff Notes version that like left out a lot of the things that like establish or set up things. Like kind of what I was talking about how we don't really get a sense of like the outside world and how it's a post-apocalyptic setting, and how the Oasis is this like place where everyone essentially lives. It's school, it's work, it's not just a video game, and so sort of the stakes that go into like them wanting to try to retain the Oasis for them and not for this like corporate entity. Like, you get a sense of that in the book. You get the full sense of that. In the movie, you really don't. And I think that needed to happen. And also,
yeah, that's true.
Also, maybe you just get maybe a better sense of like the Halliday character in the book as well.
See, I thought you got more of a sense of him in the movie.
Yeah, you might be right. It's been a while since I've read the book. I think they did a decent job with the Halliday character in the movie, actually. I do think he was probably the most interesting character in the movie.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
He's definitely this like he starts off and you think of him as sort of a Steve Jobs type, but he's definitely like this loner, socially awkward guy. But there's like this whole thing with like his relationship to this other person and how that like plays a big role in it, and like I don't even know who that was, or like
that's a good point. We never actually saw footage of her. We only saw a recreation of her in the Oasis.
Yeah, it doesn't make the impression on you that it was supposed to, for being such a like important plot point.
Yeah. I think the first time you even see her is in that one scene.
Yeah, and well, you see like a picture of her, or she's in like that Shining dance scene.
Yeah, that's the scene I was talking about.
Yeah. Speaking of the dance scene, the Saturday Night Fever like dancing scene I thought was so bad. Which is, of course, where he first professes his love and also says his name.
Yeah, rookie move.
Yeah, I am pretty sure that's not in the book.
If you had... What about this? let's say you could recast Wade. Is there someone we would pick that you think would make it better? Or is it just the dialogue no one can make good?
I think it is kind of dialogue that you can't make good. I mean, that line that I've already forgotten that I said earlier, like a fanboy knows a hater, like nobody can sell that. It's just dumb.
I don't know. I mean, I know I keep talking about Arrested Development and Michael Cera, but like Michael Cera, I feel like
You think?
is a crazy response.
Yeah, but he's like 40 years old now, isn't he? I don't know. He's not that old, but he's not.
I feel like he can do tongue in cheek though. Like I feel like if he said the line, "A hater knows a fanboy," you could tell that even he knows what he's saying is lame. You know, he would add another element, another layer.
I guess I can see him selling it better than Ty Sheridan.
Because he's actually like a nerd, whereas Ty Sheridan looks like a jock to me, and is basically like a jock wearing glasses, and he's like, he just looks like a dumb bro to me.
Anyway, I think it's a weak movie, but you can still have fun with it, and that's about all I really could say about it.
Yeah, I think it's a fun movie, and I think that it. I want people to get into VR, so I want people to watch it.
Well, I think that's going to happen no matter what. I want there to be better movies about VR.
I agree. I mean, Snow Crash is happening on Amazon, so I can't remember if that's a TV or a movie, but that's going to be something to watch.
Like, The Matrix is essentially a VR movie.
I guess that's true. Yeah, that's true.
And that was obviously much better than...
That's like full dive kind of stuff, though. I don't know that we can call that... Like, VR, I think, has to incorporate some sort of... Well, I guess virtual reality, that is what it means. I guess you're right. You're right about that.
So that's why, like, they can make better movies with this concept. They just can't be written by Ernest Cline.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. If he does... I mean, he says he's writing Ready Player 2. When he writes that, and if it gets optioned into a movie, I very much doubt Spielberg is going to come back and direct Ready Player 2.
Yeah, you're probably right about that.
So we'll have another person's take on it. Although I don't know that Spielberg added a ton to it.
Well, so the one thing is he didn't want to do too many references of his own work. And I feel like I don't remember specifically all the references in the book, but I feel like you almost have to have Spielberg references in there. Like, I guess there was a T-Rex in the race.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, they could get somebody else and have them do like a more character-driven thing with it that does better with the world building. Like
a Michael Cera is what you're saying.
Michael Cera should act, direct, and write Ready Player 2.
I'm just saying, like, think about...
No, I agree with you. He would definitely have been a better choice than Ty Sheridan, but...
And, like, I could believe as Michael Cera being, like, a lovesick kind of person in a way that is adorable instead of just like a weirdo, you know? Because that's basically what he played in Arrested Development. I guess I recently read something about the new Arrested Development season coming out on Netflix, and so I have, like, been rewatching Arrested Development, so it's fresh in my mind.
What is that video game movie that he's in? It's like not a video game movie, but it's like...
Oh, Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Yeah.
That's a comic book movie.
Yeah, so he did that. I mean, I feel...
Yeah, that's a very similar character in a lot of ways, because it's like that's the same thing where, like, the girl is a lot more interesting, and he's this guy who has to sort of compete these challenges, and, like, the real reward is the girl. Very similar to this movie, but, like,
which I think
I don't
a lot
want to typecast Michael Cera, but
a lot of people are, would think of that as a bad thing, where if you're like the winning is getting the girl. But yeah, he's definitely better at adding that sort of quirky, like, he adds something to the character with his personality.
Exactly.
And Ty Sheridan brought essentially nothing to this character.
Yeah, he was a blank slate, a real tabula rasa or whatever. But, like, even in that crazy scene that I'm obsessed with, I can see a world where Michael Cera is saying those lines, and I'm actually like laughing because I think it's funny.
Yeah, the delivery there and the
It's very important.
sort of the chemistry between the two people involved in that scene could have sold it so much better.
Yeah. Closing thoughts?
I guess go see it, but especially if you read and had any sort of fondness for the book whatsoever, as flawed as it might be, like, it'll still be a fun time.
I agree. Check it out. VR is great, and
Michael
gonna be
Cera
more
is
VR.
great.
also true. Thank you for joining us for this, our first movie we've ever done a video on, Ready Player One.
See you next time.
Goodbye.